Hey everybody, welcome to Grumpy Tonight. Sorry I didn't put out a notice on this, but we're just gonna go with it anyway. Hopefully you guys will join in. Those of you that don't, we'll run it again later, and I'll do a watch party tomorrow night where I can interact with some of you if you want to watch it then. If you don't catch it live now. First, I want to thank all the sponsors as always for helping us get here. If it wasn't for sponsors, we wouldn't be doing this. So if you've got a cannabis business and you're interested in sponsoring the show, interested in helping out in what I do at the Capitol in trying to fight for the patients of Oklahoma, get a hold of us and let's see about getting you your logo on the show. Today, I don't have anybody in the room with me other than Moto here, who's doing all the magic camera work. But I have Lawrence Pasternack on another line here. Lawrence is going to join us here, and we're just going to talk about a little bit of everything. We've got a whole bunch on our mind today. And then here in just a bit, Julie Esell is going to come on. She got tied up doing something. As soon as she breaks free, she'll let us know, and we'll get her on here for some legal answers as always. Okay, can we bring Lawrence on? Is that him? There he is. There's Lawrence. Hi, Lawrence. How you doing today?
I'm tired today. I don't know what it is. I told you earlier, I'm just having one of those days where I just am drained. But here I am.
Sounds like
Feeling
maybe it's a
yeah.
sativa. Sounds like maybe it needs to be a sativa day, but we'll talk about that off camera. So what have you? Let's see. We talked about a few things off camera that we want to go over. I want to start with one that's been hot on Facebook lately, and that is the story about Mark Wayne Mullins.
Uh,
What did you pick up on that? Why don't you let me know what you know about that?
I likewise read some of those news stories about some of the things that he said. I believe he was in Muskogee. He was speaking on the issue in Muskogee, and just indicated that he was just vehemently opposed to cannabis legalization in any form, opposed the banking bill, and so on. This is obviously a position that certain Republicans still maintain. Um,
But how
those
many? I'm curious. How many, Lawrence? How many at this point are? I know, unfortunately, we have at least two here in Oklahoma. Well, three here in Oklahoma. We have him, Langford, and Inhofe, who all still believe in reefer madness. But how many do you think we have in Washington?
it's hard to say. I think that with regards to the House, the Democratic majority will be supportive of many of the more progressive bills, and then maybe another 50 or so Republicans from the House. And then when it comes to the Senate, one way to kind of start off doing the analysis is to say that we have 33 states that have legalized medical or recreational. So that would be 66 senators. Now, obviously, not every one of them will be supportive, even though their state is legalized. But I think that's sort of a good benchmark. I was just reading an article about a senator from Utah, who is a Republican senator from Utah who supports cannabis reform. So I think that they're probably over 50%. Where exactly in the Senate, I'm not sure. But, let's say it's whatever, 48 Democrats and then just a handful of Republicans, and they can get these things passed, assuming, of course, they even get to a vote.
Okay, now my view on this is starting to change some, and it's from the time that I've been doing this, and I haven't spent any time in Washington. I don't know any of them, but I can only assume Washington runs on even more money than Oklahoma City. So I'm finding that reefer madness isn't always reefer madness at this point. I'm wondering what you think about that. I'm thinking that they're using reefer madness to hide what might be a financial motive. Like, for example, we all saw a story of Mark Wayne Mullins shortly after he got into office, apparently buying some stocks in a pharmaceutical company that he's on the board or in the committee that makes the decision, and he made this stock purchase just before the committee approved three new drugs for this pharmaceutical company to go public. So, is his fear that it's the devil's lettuce, Or is his fear that his stocks will drop because we won't need two of those medications because cannabis can somehow step in and take their place? What do you think?
Well, I don't know what his financial holdings are like. He certainly could still sell those positions. Maybe he already has sold those positions. But what impact cannabis would have on the pharmaceutical industry, I don't know. I'm sure it'll have some. When you look at the data, for instance, the opioid prescribing, benzodiazepine prescribing go down in states where cannabis has been legalized. So, we could estimate maybe a 30 to 50% drop in those two particular classes of medications. But then what percentage of total revenue for a company those represent, I don't know. Purdue is obviously, pretty much screwed as it is, given the lawsuits against them.
So those companies that make these particular medications that you're talking about that could get phased out by cannabis, I think if we were to look into it, I'm wondering what might the connection be between their campaign contributions and those received by people who claim to have reefer madness.
Well, one of the examples of the way in which pharmaceutical industry has tried to influence votes is in Arizona a few years ago with Insys, the makers of both fentanyl patches and synthetic THC, donated, I think, $500,000 to the No campaign. They still lost, but I think they lost. I forget whether that was for. I think that was the one where recreational didn't make it through. But anyhow, so they might have succeeded in preventing recreational in that year in 2016. But anyhow, we know that there's a lot of money at stake. But the thing is, there's money at stake on both sides, right? Both the pharmaceutical industry has their concerns about the encroachment of cannabis use, but then as well as that, there are billions and billions of dollars behind the cannabis industry, ranging from agriculture to tobacco and alcoholic beverage companies taking an interest in it, and so on. So, you look at John Boehner, for instance, Republican, former Speaker of the House, and Boehner is one of the strongest lobbyists in favor of cannabis in DC. So the current opposition, it might be just strictly ideological. It might be, they may be thinking just practically. This is sort of what I'm imagining. I'm imagining some of them are saying, well, there's no stopping it, but they could at least maintain their ideological objection to perpetuate the image of themselves for future elections, and or let it be known that if they do vote for it, then the cost to get them to vote for it, politically or economically, will be pretty high.
So basically what we have to do is match whatever funds they might lose in the pharmaceutical industry for them to stop tilting the scales or tipping the scales.
Or something like that. Obviously it's well beyond our power here in Oklahoma to try to move these things, but people like John Boehner and Normal and so forth, these are the lobbyists who will be meeting with the opposition and figuring out what's needed to get them on board.
What my biggest concern is in Washington, I think, is that the legalization of cannabis and the normalization of cannabis, as it should be, is directly going to be tied directly to and roll out as fast as pharmaceutical companies and other money interests can secure their interests in the cannabis industry, so they take no loss. In other words, Philip Morris would stop fighting cannabis when they're selling cannabis joints, instead of tobacco, and so on. Once they find a way to make a synthetic of this particular terpene or whatever it is that we need from the plant for whatever we need that for, then they're okay with it then, as long as they get a patent on it and they're the only delivery method is through them. I think it's so tied to money. I think for the science is so strong in favor of the normalization of cannabis that I fully believe in my heart that at this point it is only money-related opposition. It's masked as a whole bunch of other things, but I believe it's only money-related opposition. What do you think?
Well, I suspect that there is some genuine ideological opposition. There are some people who, you know, like the Jeff Sessions of the world, thought that only bad people use marijuana, right? So I think there are some people who really do have that mindset. But let me give you an example. GW Pharmaceuticals. They they're the ones that are behind Epidiolex, right? The CBD treatment for seizures that's FDA approved. And also throughout a lot of the developed world, they also have a combination THC CBD product called Sativex, which is an oral spray that's used for multiple sclerosis and for neuropathic pain and so on. It's been approved in, I don't know, maybe 60 different countries, but not here yet in the United States. So here's, I think, part of the way in which the game is working in DC. Companies like GW Pharma could provide THC and CBD from cannabis. It's cannabis-derived THC and CBD, just like if you had a vape cartridge or whatever. But they would charge thousands of dollars a month for it.
Right.
And so if the FDA approved Sativex, then arguably the pressure would be off DC saying, look, we have medical grade cannabis now. It's cannabis derived, it's not synthetic, it has both THC and CBD in it. And so anybody who needs it, they can go through their doctors and use it. The problem, however, is that if it has THC in it, they're going to have to do something about the Schedule 1 status of THC. So in theory, they could move THC to Schedule 2 and then keep the natural cannabis plant as Schedule 1. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are lobbyists from GW Pharma and similar industries who are trying to basically maintain the status quo as long as possible at the federal level to get things like Sativex on the market, to keep cannabis proper illegal, but to reschedule THC.
Yeah.
I think when you're looking at the pharmaceutical money game short term, that would be it. Longer term, it would be investigational drugs, further generations of drugs that would be active on the endocannabinoid system.
Oh, that makes sense. Again, it's all about the money. So back to our state. Lawrence, what do you think about the way things are wrapping up for this year? I know we don't have the answers on everything yet. Not everything is finished. We still have committees. But what's your overall sense of how this session is rolling out or wrapping up?
My sense is that many of the more worrisome bills coming from the Senate have been stopped by House committees. There are probably some things that the House wanted that have been stopped by the Senate. Obviously, 2612 is significant for many reasons, and that's already become signed by the governor. 1030, I don't know what the current version looks exactly like, but looks like 1030 is going to end up becoming law. And
now 1030 is I'm sorry to interrupt. 1030 is a pretty big mixed bag. It has some good, it has some bad. Some of these other bills, I think, were supposed to help some of that. But again, if they don't go through in the exact right order, it won't matter anyway. And if 1030 is the last one to go through, that's the way it is.
Yeah. I don't know if there's been any revisions, but one recent version of 1030, if memory serves, authorizes the Department of Health to release the patient information to the police database. So formerly it was supposed to be the case that only the 24-digit code was going to be retained by the Department of Health.
Right.
I think it's 1030 that authorizes the release of all information on the front of the card to the police database.
Okay, so that's to verify your card, or that's how it's being passed off. Yeah, that's the rationale, is that it's to verify your card. But again, we look. Everybody has to acknowledge cannabis has been stomped on for so long in this state. We've all been stomped on by law enforcement for so long in this state. We have somewhat of PTSD from this. Those of us that have done this in behind closed doors and have now come out are having some trouble adjusting to some of this. And the way this was written and the way this all was negotiated, it was understood that cannabis was a different medication, and that because of the years of people being arrested for it, that there would be certain things that we would approach differently, like privacy. And that's what the 24-digit code is about. Everything else was supposed to remain private. So, it's troublesome to me that since the beginning of the session, they've been making attempts to do this. Back in the summer, the health department did that, accidental posting of every address of every commercial business on their website. The sharing of our information, be it in the commercial industry or the patients, it is a problem, and it will be used against us. And so that's a real concern. That's a real concern for me.
The way I view the war on drugs more broadly is it's a war of America against its own people. And it's a war that America started here against its own people and basically mandated that the rest of the world follow in line with it. And almost every country did for decades. And finally, that's starting to change. There's 30 or so countries that have now legalized cannabis in one form or another. There are a few countries that have completely decriminalized all drugs, Portugal, for instance. And so I see the war on drugs as just an egregious harm against humanity. Because while I don't want people to be using addictive drugs and I don't want people to be ruining their lives, I think that the so-called cure is worse than the disease, right? Mass incarceration. The United States has 8 to 10 times the incarceration rate of Canada and most European countries. That's astounding, right? Per capita, 10 times the incarceration rate. This is just horrendous. And Oklahoma's at the top of that.
And Oklahoma's at the top of that, yeah.
So, I think that I have this idea that in generations to come, 50 years, 100 years from now, I don't know, people then will look back on the 20th century and see the war on drugs as in the same class of crimes against humanity as the Holocaust.
Really?
Millions. Think about the millions of people.
Well, I can see that. I can see that.
Whose lives were destroyed.
Yeah.
Millions of people in jail. 10-year sentences for just having a joint on them.
Right. Yeah. We've got people on here watching right now that are commenting about the time they did because of the cannabis plant, time they spent in prison. So
think about where we are this way, right? Think about this. We've made it past D-Day, right? We have now a foothold, right, against the forces of evil. A foothold against those who are preventing people from managing their own bodies. We now have that foothold, right? Countries all around the world, states throughout this country are now saying no to cannabis prohibition. But we still have the war continuing. So think about it this way. The Nazi Party is still in control, right? And so as the Allied forces start encroaching through Europe, taking back land, they have to keep all the Jews safe. Right? And so by releasing the names of cannabis cardholders, you're basically letting the Nazis know where the Jews are.
Okay. Well, that's going to stir some stuff up. I'm sure about that.
Once again, a couple generations from now, I think we will be looking at the 20th century war on drugs and mass incarceration as a crime against humanity.
Well, those of us that have suffered at the hands of law enforcement during that can certainly agree to that. I've never hidden the fact that my felonies were in 1985 for cannabis. That brought detriment to my entire life, stopped me from jobs, from schooling, from all sorts of things, stopped me from being able to get in the military. It stopped me from a lot, and it was all because of a cannabis plant. Hooligan Bean here talks about how he did 3 years because of the plant. Too many. Look, and when we started the session, this is something I'm concerned about too. When we started the session, or last summer, we had what we called the Damon Rule, and that was in respect to Damon Beck, one of the guys who helped start the movement here in the state. And that was to guarantee that felons would be able to work in this industry. And while we kept the lawmakers from writing any laws to make that happen, where we failed was in stopping the OBNDD from making that regulation. There's a difference between a law and a regulation. These people aren't accountable to us. So, that's something we have to get fixed. And the OBNDD, the way they're taking it now, is it's a case-by-case basis. Now, people have told me they were going to apply for this approval. I was told by Mark Woodward of the OBNDD on the show that it would be a fairly simple process, and they weren't going to be giving people a lot of static. If you were charged with cannabis or convicted of cannabis, they weren't going to stop you from working in the industry. It was going to be more severe issues. But I haven't had anybody reach out and say they've gotten that permission yet. So if anybody's watching that has, please let me know. And Mark, if you're watching, Mr. Woodward, let's get you back on the show soon, and let's look into that. I want to follow up on that.
The FDA is fast tracking ecstasy, MDMA for approval. So a drug that was Schedule 1 for decades is now being fast tracked for approval by the FDA. Psilocybin is being reviewed by the FDA for approval, hallucinogenic mushroom. So all these drugs that we banned because of their psychoactivity, we're now acknowledging their therapeutic value. And I think one of the problems, going back perhaps to Representative Mullins and others who sort of think about cannabis as the devil's lettuce, is psychoactivity and medicinal benefit are not mutually exclusive. Even if you think psychoactivity is not something that we should be promoting, the medicinal benefit is still there. And so, there are ways you can disconnect one from the other, high CBD strains and so on. But that psychoactivity may or may not be beneficial to some people. But that doesn't preclude the fact that the plant, through all the other molecules in it, through the entourage and so on, has an ample array of benefits beyond just that psychoactivity. So it's irrational for them to think because it's psychoactive, it's bad.
Lawrence, I've got an idea, and we're going to wrap this segment up here in a minute, but I have an idea. Since what I like to do is to gather people who do specific things better than anybody else and get them to do that. And while you certainly have always done an incredible job helping us with legislation, you just touched on a little bit of philosophy there when you talked about how you equate the war on drugs to the Holocaust. And so that's got me thinking about something. Since you are a philosophy professor, I guess, or would that be what should be your title?
That's right.
What would you think about doing? I'd like you to do a segment every week or every 2 weeks, whatever you're comfortable with, where you come on and we talk about the philosophy of this, and you touch on issues like that. And we don't necessarily go over the rules and the regulations that you and I do on a regular basis, but we expand that a bit as to just what you think, because I think everybody would benefit greatly from that. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I don't know if I have new ideas every week on this topic, but certainly we could have some sessions on it. Definitely.
That'd be great. Okay, so what would you like to say before we wrap up this segment?
Well, one thing I'd like to say is that I have been keeping my eye out for products on the market that, as I was just talking about, are meant to be less psychoactive. And when the marketplace first opened, it was pretty much high THC flower. Those were the only options. But now I'm starting to see vapes and tinctures and so forth that have ratios 10-to-1 CBD to THC, 4-to-1 CBD to THC, and so on. So both some low CBD or high CBD strains of flower, as well as quite an array of products that are meant to counter the psychoactivity. So I just think that's great, because frankly, there aren't a lot of people who could spend their day using something that's high THC. So I just want to encourage everybody out there, all the people who are growing and processing and so on, that this is a big market, I think, for people who are looking for less psychoactive products.
That's great. Lawrence, I think you definitely set a good tone for medicine, cannabis as medicine in the state of Oklahoma. So I truly hope that these processors are paying attention to what you say and that they follow through with those ideas, because that's what's going to take care of the people and get them what they need, not just a bunch of THC. That's not always the solution. So okay, Lawrence, well, we're going to take a break, and then when we come back, we're going to have Julie Esell with us. But Lawrence, I want to thank you for coming on, and I'm going to hold you to that. I want a philosophy segment in the show as often as you're comfortable doing that. Well, I'd love to hear that. Some of the stuff we talk about off camera when we're not talking about a specific bill, but more about what you think. I think everybody will benefit for that.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Okay, thanks, Lawrence. All right, folks, I'm going to take a short break, and when we come back, Julie Esell will be with us, and we'll look at the legal angle of some of this. Be right back. In the summer of 2018, despite a fierce and well-financed opposition, the state of Oklahoma passed State Question 788, giving the citizens the most open medical marijuana system in the U.S.
The people of Oklahoma spoke last night, and they said they wanted medical marijuana.
Critics tried to frame 788 as being too loosely written, pointing to the bill's lack of qualifying conditions. Proponents countered that the bill would allow maximum access to the widest range of patients. State Question 788 passed by more than 13 points. My friends call me Grumpy. I'm a citizen lobbyist on the front lines of the cannabis revolution in the great state of Oklahoma. I represent not only the 507,000 individuals that voted for medical cannabis, but my fellow citizens who need this medicine. Join us as we travel the state to meet with politicians, activists, business owners, but most importantly, patients. And we are back. Welcome to Grumpy Tonight. Had to take a little break. Hope you enjoyed the commercials. Again, I want to thank the sponsors. And on that note, you just saw a commercial from Sweet Leaf. Sweet Leaf wants to give away a recommendation. So it's a medical marijuana recommendation, the doctor part. So if you can get up to Bartlesville to get that, post that in here, and we'll pick one of you at the end of the night. And I'll call you tomorrow morning and we'll get that out to you. We've given away a few of these. We've been giving away a lot of shirts. I've been giving away as much stuff as I can give away. I love giving stuff away. So anyway, Julie Esell is going to join us now, and we're going to keep going at it. Hey, there she is. Hey, Julie.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am just peachy.
I heard you had a little fence trouble today at your house.
I did. I've been sitting about 4 fence posts in cement, and if anyone wants to come out, come on out.
Well, I was going to come and help, but
next time for sure.
Next time I'm there. I'm
Yeah.
there. Yeah. Let me know what times the concrete's going to be dry. I should get there a few minutes after that.
Yeah.
So how's everything else going? You enjoying your weekend?
I am, and on that note, I am at home, and I have 4 children and 3 dogs, and I've locked them all in a closet.
That's
However,
good.
if you see something random, like a naked little kid flying through the air, just ignore it.
I saw the funniest post from you. I think it was a post, or maybe it was a text. Oh no, it was a text that you sent to me. I asked you to call me. Can I? Hopefully, I can tell everybody.
Yeah.
I said something about, can you call me? And you said yes, but you had the 4 kids with you, so it would be about an hour unless you killed one of them. And then it would be an hour and 10 minutes, which just was the funniest thing. I just couldn't. It was hilarious. So,
efficient, if nothing else.
yes, that's good. Well, let's talk about the Capitol.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, goodness. You've been doing a lot of reading, right?
Yeah. Yes, I have.
Yes, you have. Or you're ready to fake it till you make it, right?
Absolutely.
So, help me figure out here, where are we at in this? What is, if nothing else goes through, where are we at as of now? What I mean by that, for example, I don't want to be so broad, because you'll just go on forever. But like the home grow, okay? I love talking about that one. That's what you and I met discussing, the fence. Mm-hmm. Where's the fence on the home grow right now? What's the law right now for the home grow fence?
Currently, as of today, or at the end of session?
As of today.
As of today. And, if you're growing it outside, you have to have it surrounded by a fence with a lock and not viewable from the street.
Okay. And it doesn't specify a chain link or a wooden fence, which is what we originally argued over, because I love telling people this. Mm-hmm. I explained how, because when you did full sun, that I would have to put up a fence that would span the curvature of the earth as to not block any of my sunlight on my plants. And you, of course, thought that was hilarious. But here we are, a year later.
I also nicely acquiesced, if you forget that part of the story, too.
You did. So I'm glad to hear it's still that. Now, at the end of session, what's it going to be at the end of session? Or what is it, August, when these new rules take effect? Is that right?
Yeah, it's supposed to, there's 2 things. None of that fence has been changed in the health department rules that they're still promulgating. The changes would be in 2612. And the changes in 2612 aren't that much more substantial than, what's currently in there now. I do not believe it requires a wooden fence. It's very similar to the rules now about it, being shielded from view, fenced and locked, and only accessible, to the patient themselves. There isn't, for the straight up patient doing a home grow, I don't believe there's a lot of implication. It's more for, I think, the unresolved problem still, as we've discussed, is for, caregivers who need somebody to do the home grow for them.
Okay, now we worked on caregiver language. We tried to get caregiver language in there. There's an amendment on SB 31 referring to caregiver language, as per what we met with Scott Fettgetter about in his office, a bunch of us. But when Lawrence was looking at it, he seems, because the way it's laid out, he was confused as to whether that actually made it in the final version or not. Do you know if we got any new caregiver language beyond what's in 2612?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay. Well, maybe we need to look at SB 31 and when you get a chance and see if there's an amendment on there to that. Again, I'm just not sure if it made it all the way to the top. I mean, I'm not sure. And the unfortunate part about that, where isn't caregiver language in 2612 requiring you to grow on their property, on the patient's property?
Well, so I'm not exactly. Maybe.
Yeah, no, wait. Now I remember. This is the one where we talked about how you could grow on someone else's property with their permission. So what they were saying was, the way the rules are now, if you thread the needle, I could give you, if you're my patient, okay, I'm your caregiver, I could give you permission to grow in a spot on my property, and then your plants could grow on my property that way, instead of me having to go take care of them at your place. But there's no provision in there allowing me to walk out and take care of your plants. So every time I do that, I'm going to break the law, which is why I fought for this extra language.
I spent some time looking at that earlier today, Chris, and there is a provision in 2612 that gives the caregiver all of the rights of the patient cardholder. And so if a patient cardholder has a right to care for their own plants, taking those two provisions together, I would certainly argue then that the caregiver has a right to care for the patient's plants on the caregiver's property if they've given permission for that. It's not as specifically stated as that, but again, you have to take different provisions and put them together. And so my reading it as of today, I think that absolutely would be lawful.
Okay, so we'll keep our eye open for the first case where this happens, and we'll jump in there and follow this one all the way up the chain. And
I would much prefer it be specifically listed, and that's what we were told was going to happen. The last time I looked at that Senate bill you talked about, I did not see that language added in. But frankly, I think that we can already get there. Although it'd probably be an ugly process because somebody's going to have to get in trouble first, and that's not what we want.
Right. That's what annoys me, is the test case. I don't want to be a test case.
Right.
So what do you think about as Lawrence likes to call it, and I should have asked him about it when he was on earlier, the Soprano bill, the disposal bill? What's your thoughts on that?
I'm trying to keep my countenance nice, if you can't tell. Okay,
now let's keep in mind, let's start from the point of what was taken off of the list. In other words, seeds, stems, fan leaves, those are not on the list of things that you have to pay a service to dispose of. Roots, dirt.
Correct.
So where is this bill left? It's, unless I'm mistaken, all that's left is flour that you can't get rid of another way.
Yes, but the way that it's worded, the definition in there is, yes, it does exclude those things you discussed, but it uses a broad definition that would encompass things like if you had a Ziploc bag that had some, flour or bud residue in it that you had, received your bud in, sold it out of, even the tiniest amount of residue, that Ziploc bag would have to be destroyed with one of these companies. It's stupid.
So any old packaging that had cannabis in it is going to end up being on this list?
Yes, because they didn't, and I really think what would have served that bill well would be to set a weight threshold. You know, if you're talking about a little bit of residue in a Ziploc bag, nobody's going to be able to use that or do anything with it. But the way that it is, termed in there, any amount, it says any amount of, the products that are, not exempted, like the leaves and stems and that kind of thing,
Right.
have to be disposed of by one of these companies. And so I'm still not happy with it because if you look at the black letter of the law, some tiny little bit of residue in a bag would require you to have that disposed of with a company.
Okay, now, do you know anything about these? I mean, I know we don't know the companies, at least I don't know what companies are getting these yet. But do we understand the structure of this in any way? Do we understand what this service is going to do? Does it state in there that you can take the product to them, or that they must come to you? How's this going to work? Do we know? Because I've heard some things I've heard some disturbing things. So I'd like to know if you've heard anything.
My understanding, my recollection is that they come to you to get it. And there's a lot of things that bother me about this bill, and I think it's very obvious this is a special interest, and that somebody's already in line to get one or two of these permits, um, anyways, that aside, it also creates these criteria to get one of these permits. It talks about like financial information and other qualifications to be set by the health department that really play no relation to the job that is being done. And they do, the bill says that after a year the health department can authorize more licenses above the original number. However, any smart business person who gets one of these licenses is going to sign their customers up into a binding 4 or 5 year agreement. And so even if new, licenses come on, this is total antitrust, anti-monopoly. It's not, it's the opposite of that. This is, this allows these companies to have a complete monopoly, and to not, because there's only 5, if they all get together and agree on high prices and are all in agreement, then these businesses are going to be locked in to having to use one of these 5 to come pick up their.
It's 10, and
10,
it's 10.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's 10.
So they're going to be locked into having one of these 10 businesses come in and pick up their Ziploc bag, at an exorbitant price if they all get together and agree. And there really just isn't a lot of criteria outlined in the statute for these businesses, other than to be further determined by the health department, which to me speaks of either special interest or the fact that in drafting this bill the legislature didn't really know or couldn't identify any qualifications, and so just laid that over to the health department to decide. Well, okay, if you can't identify any qualifications or a real need, then why do we need this whole program to begin with?
Right. Now I'm being told it's to eliminate diversion. That's why the only thing left on the list that we can come up with is the flour that would either be moldy or not pass inspection or not be good enough for whatever reason to do something else with. I would hope that everybody would just figure out a way. I mean, obviously, everything you grow, everything you harvest has to end up in a column in your report. I think whatever doesn't end up in a column, they expect to end up in this column. My concern is, as I was saying, some things I heard mumbled around of this being a mobile incinerator that would, as you say, come to your place, but that they would bring the incinerator with them on a trailer, and that this fee was going to be almost $1,000. So that's my concern. But again, that is a rumor, and but I did hear it at the Capitol. But so we're going to have to see what that is. I don't know. I'd like to know. I'm betting somebody watching might know. I'm betting maybe there's a lawmaker that might know, that has some concept of how this is all supposed to work. They can come on here and explain it to us. And when we hear about these fees and the hundreds of dollars, how are they going to make that feasible? Are they going to be able to collect this stuff for months to where they develop a large enough amount to make it worth paying this fee, where it doesn't hit their pocketbook that hard? Or is it going to be a once a month thing or a quarterly thing? Or we don't know, do we?
We don't know, but my guess, based upon the way it's written, is that it's going to be a monthly thing to coincide with the OMA reports. And I have a good number of dispensaries as clients, and I surveyed them to see, under this bill, how much would you say you have a month, that you would need to use a company like this for? And none of my clients have indicated that they would have any, unless it's this absurd, like residue in a bag. Because if the product is not good, the bud is not good, it is caught before it gets to the dispensary. It's typically at the grower or processor level.
Right.
And then, at the grower level, you're talking about much bigger quantities if it's moldy or has issues. Now, I can see that some dispensary might have something happen to their product while it's on hand to make it unusable, or there's some kind of recall or something like this. But in talking to dispensary clients, this isn't a need that I've heard of at all.
Yeah, I can't seem to come up with much at a dispensary either, other than maybe like if some stuff sits on a shelf too long,
Right.
And that's the concern. And then again, if it's monthly, and there's a flat base fee for them to pull up, if you can't deliver this to them, if you can deliver it, that might be different. Then you could, if there's a way to pay for this by weight, that might be different.
Right.
But if it's a fee for use regardless, then we're going to have a lot of people that are going to pay this fee that should not be in that situation.
Yes. I mean, that's my concern, is you're going to have somebody who, literally has, just grams of product to be destroyed. And there is going to be some flat fee associated with that they're going to have to pay monthly. It's just not cost effective at all. And it, again, speaks to lining the pocketbooks of others.
Unfortunately, this has become a big horse trade. I've said before, it's almost not about medical anymore. It's fee for use. It's
Absolutely.
If you want to use cannabis in the state of Oklahoma, this is what it costs. Doesn't matter what's wrong with you or not wrong with you or whatever. If you want to use cannabis, here's how much we charge to use cannabis. And that number keeps getting larger. It's no longer about taking care of people.
You're absolutely right. And, the bottom line is that number gets passed on to the patients, through licensing fees, through the $825 that the health department is now requiring if a dispensary wants to sell edibles, through any, municipal or city licenses. Some of the licenses in some of these cities are as much as the OMMA license. Now you add in this fee, testing fees, which, I'm in full support of testing, don't hear me wrong, but all of these costs are passed on to the patient.
Right. Well, luckily, I know of about a half a dozen new labs that are all going to be rolling out by midsummer. So I think that's going to help with the costs. And the ones I know about, at least a couple of them, are top notch, going to be doing all the testing, not just THC and CBD.
Wonderful.
So they'll be doing it all for much less, a much better price. Okay, Julie. Well, we're going to wrap this up in a few minutes. So what specifically would you like to talk about before we wrap it up?
Two things really quickly. I'm sure that, most everyone is aware that on behalf of one of my clients, I have filed a lawsuit regarding the hemp production here in Oklahoma. We have an autopilot program to, for universities to partner with individuals and with businesses to grow industrial hemp. And the head of the USDA here in Oklahoma is, trying to block that program. And I just like, kind of to bring that to everyone's awareness, because again, this is, you're talking about hemp. It has, THC of 0.3% or less, and they're wanting to develop it for, all kinds of raw material and other uses. But we're again seeing the government coming in and saying, yeah, there's a law in place. Yeah, there's federal and state litigation in place, but we're still not going to let you do it.
Yeah. Excuse me. Hemp's going to change this whole country. So it's terrible that we have to file lawsuits to get this done. Lawrence and I were talking about that earlier. I believe Reefer Madness is more financial fear than actual reefer madness at this point. So it's gotten pretty bad. Hopefully we can get some of that straightened out, because that is a whole booming economy that we haven't even begun to touch yet. What I want to mention is the event we have coming up. You know about that one, right? At Lost Lakes. That's going to be June 28th and 29th. Music and booths and speakers. And this is going to be so much more than just cannabis. So those that think this is just a cannabis event, you're mistaken. We've got renewable energy companies that are going to be sponsoring, and other assorted things like that. So you can relate all those to cannabis. If you've got a business, you may want to be out there to talk to some of these companies about how to get your company off the grid. That would be the best way to grow cannabis, is always off the grid, in my opinion. So we're going to have everything related to a greener earth. It's going to be a great festival. We're going to have a lot of fun. I'll be the announcer for a lot of it, or at least as long as my voice holds out. But there is a huge team of people putting this together. I'm lucky enough to just get to be the spokesman. So where'd she go? She's off. I lost her. There you are.
And I just wanted to say, and this is a family-friendly event. This is not just for patient card holders. This is for, people who, want to learn more, not just about cannabis, but as Chris said, other green renewable energies. There's going to be starving artists booths. There's going to be food. There's going to be activities. And so this is a community event.
Right.
This is not for any one group.
Yeah, this is more of a state fair type of atmosphere. It's just going to be a state fair that allows cannabis businesses as well. So right. It's not just a cannabis event. And I'm going to talk about that more tonight. I'm going to go to Carrie Chronick's show here in just a little bit. So that's one reason why we need to wrap it up. I got to get over there. So Julie, I want to thank you for coming on, and thank you for everything you do, and thank you for being my co-host. I wish you could have made it into the studio today. We will do it again next week, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. Will I see you tomorrow?
Are you missing my kicks under the table?
I love your orneriness. I need your orneriness. It keeps me on my toes. I look forward to it every week. Okay, Julie, thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right, folks, as I said before, you guys put on here a name of somebody or yourself. Somebody asked here earlier if it could be a family member that needs a medical marijuana recommendation up in the Bartlesville area. We're going to give away one free. I'll do that. Tomorrow morning when I get up, I'll call the winner. So I'm going to pick the winner in the next 24 hours. So share the video with everybody you know. Tag your family member, whoever, let's see if we can get this to somebody who really needs it. A lot of us can't afford this, but if you can get to Bartlesville, Sweet Leaf will take care of you. Sweet Leaf's been doing a great job of helping out. They also have a RSO program. I don't know all the details, but you show them the condition you have, and give them some paperwork on that, and they will sell you your RSO oil for a penny. So that's helping a lot of people. I've been sending a lot of people that direction. Hopefully you guys can get up there if you need it. If you can't, they are working with some other dispensaries. We're trying to get other dispensaries on that program. In fact, my other sponsors that are watching, let's get you on that program as well. So Sweet Leaf can help people all over the state. Thank you to all the other sponsors as well. Green Country Bud in Tulsa, the Greens Bakery here in Oklahoma City, and Max's Garage in Muskogee, as well as Scissortail Law. Julie, I would never forget you a second time. Once is enough. Okay, that's it for tonight. I will be on Carrie's show later, so hop over to that. Like and share. Let's give away some free stuff. I'll be at the Capitol tomorrow morning doing what I do. That's it for tonight, folks. Stay grumpy. I'll see you on the road.